So when we recognize that we're about to be in a conflict, we often have a conflict mindset. So our attitude about how we're going to approach this conflict when we go into it. And one that we often see is competition. So the competition is a win-lose philosophy. I'm going to win, you're going to lose. I'm going to dominate, I'm looking for a victory. So when you win at the expense of the other person. They lose, you win. In this type of conflict mindset, people often resort to blaming and pushing the responsibility to the other person. So taking the blame off of yourself and putting it on the other person. And scapegoating that other person for all of the problems with the conflict. Usually it takes two people to contribute to a conflict, so it's hardly ever all the fault of one person or all the responsibility of one person. So some of the things you might kind of hear would be like, I didn't do it, it wasn't me, he made me do it, or it's, you know, you did your, lots of you statements, your fault, you. If pushing the blame to the other person doesn't work, it might escalate to threats. So threats and warnings, like if you don't stop calling me names, I'm leaving, I'm out of here. So we talk about how all of these mindsets and responses to conflict and approaches are useful sometimes. So is it ever okay to compete? If you believe anything short of achieving your goal would be harmful to you or to others, then competition would be the way to go. It's a dominating sort of approach. So what is an example of a time when that would be okay? If you believe your life is in peril, if you believe your psychological well-being is in peril, that may be your best approach. So the second mindset that we often have is, or that you can hear sometimes, is compromise. So compromise is win-lose, which means I win some and I lose some, and you win some and you lose some. And oftentimes we're taught that this is the epitome of conflict resolution, but it requires that both parties lose too. So this is what we do when we're attempting to find a middle ground, a solution that somewhat meets the needs of all concerned. So if you feel like face saving is necessary, then compromise is a good approach. So face saving means that it's important to the person who needs to save face that they don't look like totally beaten, totally belittled, that they can walk away with a little dignity because they won some. In a compromised situation, no one gets everything she or he had hoped for, but it can be a quicker resolution or a temporary one sometimes, and everyone saves face because they win at least something. So another approach, a third approach, is collaboration. So the collaboration approach is win-win. This is where we see the conflict as a set of problems to be solved rather than a I win, you win kind of game. So collaboration has a lot of concern for both parties. So you're thinking about your needs and you're thinking about the other person's needs, and so are they. Let me give you, let's see, do I want to give you that? Let's see. It may seem like collaboration and problem solving are always right, but there's no single one conflict management approach that works in all situations. So it depends on the outcome you want, the amount of time that you have, the quality of the relationship you have, and the other people involved and what they're willing to do, and the amount of power that you think that each person has. So if your boss is telling you something, there's a conflict between you and your boss, it's not always going to be appropriate for you to initiate collaboration or compromise. Well, look, like, here's what we can do. Sometimes that might be appropriate, but sometimes you might just have to surrender, right, if it's your boss. But if you can think of a positive way to compromise or collaborate that doesn't overstep the power differential between you and your boss, or you and anyone in a higher power differential than you, then that might be a real positive, because it shows your conflict resolution skills.